Eli Stokols is White House correspondent for Politico. He joins me now to go over the very latest. Lots of headlines today. Eli, thanks so much for being with us. We'd like to start with the controversy surrounding National Security Advisor Michael Flynn that we were just talking about. First of all, here, what is he accused of, and why is it serious enough that there's talk he may be forced out at this point?
Well, what's serious about this are two things. One, that he lied potentially about not having contact with Russia related to the easing of sanctions. We know that he had contact with Russian officials before Trump was sworn in as president. The question here is whether or not he discussed the U.S. easing of sanctions on Russia. Flynn said no. He told Vice President Pence no. Pence went on TV and said those conversations didn't happen. And then last week we got reports that they did. Now, the Kremlin has denied those reports, but there is real consternation inside the White House about whether Flynn can be trusted, and those concerns are obviously held by the vice president, who knows now that he was misled and went on television and said something that wasn't true. You have to view this in the context of a White House that is really riven by these sort of power struggles and by the backbiting and the turf wars inside the White House. Pence, Reince Priebus, the president's chief of staff, they've never liked Flynn. The question is that, what does Donald Trump think about Flynn? We know that over the weekend he was very critical of Flynn in conversations with people that he had privately at Mar-a-Lago, expressing regret to at least one person that he put Flynn in this position of being his national security advisor. But the bigger question is, does anything change? Does something happen? Donald Trump is not only unhappy with the performance of Flynn, he's unhappy with the performance of Priebus as well as chief of staff, with the press secretary, Sean Spicer, with a lot of people, because Trump understands that his first few weeks in office have not really gone very smoothly, and he expects that that is Priebus's responsibility. Donald Trump never actually looks in the mirror and blames himself. He just knows when things are not going well, when people are generating negative publicity for him, and he looks around and gets upset. The question is, does he make a change? He also knows that doing so wouldn't look real good in the first month of the administration.
Yeah, but I think it's also somewhat of a problem for him with Flynn, because there's all these allegations that he's been a little too cozy with Russia, or that he and Vladimir Putin have too close of a relationship. And now you have someone who says he hadn't gotten involved that then did and lied to the vice president. As you said, this just seems like a bigger mess than just maybe being unhappy with somebody's performance. There are also some questions about some other staffers at the White House. Do you have any indication that President Trump will shake up his administrative leadership team, as you were just discussing some of those other names like Sean Spicer?
Yeah, again, this is all, you make a good point about what's different about the Flynn things in terms of the consequences related to national security, rather than just how the White House and the West Wing look to the public, or, how they're dealing with Congress. But, with Donald Trump, it is very strange, because this is a guy who's very sensitive to public perception, has a pretty quick trigger sometimes and a short attention span, and all the things that we know about his personality and his sort of obsession with the imagery of the White House. He is very aware of what it will look like if there's a shakeup this early on. And so I think he's reluctant to do that, whether it's with Flynn or with anyone else. Another thing is, who do you get to replace these people? This is not an administration that had people running towards them, the sort of A-listers, the people in Washington who have been around, have worked in the White House, who have worked in the national security and counterintelligence community, those sort of veterans of the establishment. I know Trump ran against the establishment, but those people who have a lot of expertise have not come running towards this administration begging for jobs. And so you filled out the administration already with a lot of B-list type folks, C-list type people. If they leave, it's not like they have a lot of people beating down their door, a lot of great candidates to come in and be the next White House press secretary. Certainly there are a lot of people inside the West Wing angling for Priebus's job. Kellyanne Conway, we know, would love the title of chief of staff, but we don't know that that really changes the dysfunction, and that we know that she was on thin ice with the president last week. So it's sort of, as the world turns, the soap opera inside the White House,
drama.
And it's really hard to know, if anything drastic happens as a result of any of this stuff.
Well, we really just have to keep watching to see how a number of these play out in the coming days. I do want to talk about, though, one of the other big headlines, that missile test by North Korea and President Trump's response to it. President made no mention of North Korea in his response, instead offering only that the message that he wanted to get out was that he had support for Japan. Do you find that unusual?
Of course. It's sort of, you kept expecting to hear something else, and then he left, and he went, as we know now, into a ballroom where there was a wedding taking place, and gave a sort of, off the cuff toast to the bride and groom. We know that he had the conversations about what to say and was basically informed about the nuclear missile launch test in the dining room, out on the patio at Mar-a-Lago with a lot of people, milling around, taking pictures, sort of in earshot of waiters and people. I mean, this is sort of national security stuff, and it's just out in the open. So beyond the, oddness of the response from Donald Trump to a very serious event, and an event that in some way was a test of his administration, beyond the oddity of all that, you have concerns about just, national security and the security with which classified information and these top-level discussions are taking place.
But, he ran because he wasn't an establishment candidate. So some of these rules he's just going to have to figure out, I guess, as we go along here. Last question for you before you go. The president is meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. What are you going to be watching for? Well, a
lot of this, again, is sort of the awkwardness or, how this looks to people. But deeper than that, be interesting to see if they come out with, some sort of statement that is, shows that they're on the same page related perhaps to trade. Trudeau is on the left. Trudeau has made a point of going out.
They couldn't be more opposite each other, really.
Right. Trudeau has gone out there and said, all these people, these refugees that are, you can come to Canada, you're welcome here. Tweeted pictures of himself welcoming people from one of the countries that, Trump had basically used, named in this ban. And so there's a lot of differences here. And I think, the question is, can he pull off the statesmanship? Can Trump it was a little icier. It was a little more awkward in terms of the things that we've seen so far in terms of the imagery, the handshake we've seen early on. We'll watch this press conference that they're going to have shortly and see how that goes. But the question is, can, a long-standing ally and an incredibly important, neighbor of the United States, can, Trump make sure that things don't get worse? Can they talk about trade in a way that, doesn't alienate Canada? Can they talk about refugee policies and immigration in a way that, doesn't sort of make things worse and stick a finger in Trudeau's eye? We'll watch for that, and we'll see what comes out of this. But, again, it's Donald Trump. It's very unpredictable. And you also have to watch after the meeting is over, because certainly he can say things and do things and act diplomatic in the room. And then you never know if he, tweets or responds to something else later. So this is just sort of the beginning of this relationship, and we'll have to see how it goes over the long term.
Well, the Prime Minister will have to be careful, too, because they need, when I say they, Canada needs a lot of our business from America. So there are some delicate issues on both sides for both of them. Eli Stokols, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.